Listen-only mode.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our PlanIt webinar. I'm Raya, and I will be facilitating the webinar today. If during this webinar you have any questions, please post them using the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We will get to all of these questions at the end. Also, attached to the control panel in the handout section, we have a handout for you that is a list of links and resources that we will be mentioning during the webinar and more. So you can just download that PDF and click on the links. Today's webinar is about integrating economic development strategies into everyday planning. Economic development is a valuable component in setting the course for how your community will grow and thrive. We will also discuss tools and resources that can help benefit your community's economic growth and prosperity. So now let me introduce our presenter. Corinne Wendell.
Hello, everyone.
Is a senior planner and sector representative at the Metropolitan Council. She leads the development of resources related to regional economic competitiveness and incorporating economic development into local comp plans. Corinne, I will now turn it to you.
Thank you, Raya, and thank you all for listening in on the webinar today. So we're going to get started with what are we going to be talking about for today's topics. So we're going to have an overall explanation of economic development, go into a couple of the fundamentals, the importance. We're really going to take a look at some of those outdated methods that we see in economic development planning, looking at some new methods, some benefits, and then we're going to go into those big questions, those bigger questions that you have overall for economic development, whether it's in your comprehensive plan or what you do in your day-to-day planning work. We're then going to wrap it around over to comprehensive planning and how that plays a part in economic development planning, how that translates then into your day-to-day operations. We're going to take a look at some economic competitiveness and what that means for your community specifically and the region. And then we're going to take a look at 6 examples of different communities that have incorporated economic development into their planning. And then we'll close with some resources that we can leave you with after this webinar. So first off, when planning for economic development, the goal here is to create and maintain a strong, vibrant local economy. So these 3 components that you see here are directly linked to effective economic development and the planning that you do for it. And so if you can achieve the overall vision of your vibrant community, then you will in turn see your community grow, prosper, and thrive. And so as we all know, economic development plays an integral role into what we do as planners each and every day. So the International Economic Development Council defines economic development as a program, a group of policies or activities that seek to improve the economic well-being and quality of life for a community by creating or retaining jobs that facilitate growth and provide that stable tax base. We commonly see in economic development efforts a series of activities that directly aims to generate economic prosperity, which creates places that matter and in turn enhances that overall quality of life. So here are some fundamentals that we see in our everyday economic development efforts. So as we know, local government plays a key role into what we do for economic development, from fostering successful business climate to creating long-term relationships with stakeholders. So then whether you're with a township or a city or even a county, there's a clear connection between the efforts of a community and economic development. So ensuring that the goals of the community align with the policies in economic development is incredibly important. So for strategic development planning, so within the work of establishing economic development policies, you may have or want to create an economic development strategic plan or economic development chapter within your comprehensive plan. So this will strengthen your community's goals. It would create a roadmap for achieving success in your community and something that you can integrate into what you do in your everyday planning. What's important after that is what you have for your development process. So once the plan is in place, creating a development process that is business friendly is vital to ensuring interested developers have a clear understanding of what is expected and the goals of the community. Then, of course, is the importance of plan implementation. So plan implementation is a sure way to capitalize on opportunities when they arise by creating timelines and performance measures along with identifying steps and resources. Reaching your community's goals will then be simplified. And lastly, we have regional initiatives. So coordinating your economic development approach through intergovernmental collaboration can positively impact and protect efforts at the local level. So as cities in the region grow, develop, redevelop, and evolve, economic development remains a fixture in orchestrating successful communities and ultimately enhancing the quality of life. So as planners know, who are listening today, planners can genuinely influence economic development outcomes. We all know this in everything that we do each and every day to further economic development strategies. So the answer in this lies in the importance of the comprehensive plan, and then in particular, the ability for planners to help identify ways to plan that can lead to outcomes such as job creation, job retention, tax-based diversification, development, and even redevelopment. So planning for economic development within the comprehensive plan has emerged recently in many parts of the country as a way to emphasize economic competitiveness factors such as infrastructure or housing availability or workforce development programs. Successful collaborations involve the combination of economic development, community development, and your workforce development. So now we're going to take a look at some of those outdated methods. So these are some methods that you may have seen in the past for economic development and some of the things that may not be working as well as they once did. So traditional economic development elements in the comp plan are being seen as outdated. So from data dumps to impractical recommendations, economic development elements fail to deliver the innovative investment strategies that should help a community capitalize on its unique character and assets, much less address economic conditions in a quickly evolving global context. So some of the issues seen in how economic development has been planned for in the past include the challenge of economic developers operating on a year-to-year strategic plan, as opposed to when planners, we operate really on those long-range plans. And so the timing of that sometimes is different. And so also using irrelevant indicator data that leads to incorrect recommendations, not having a targeted public engagement process, or failing to integrate economic development policies into other planning elements. And then also our last one is offering incentives that may be too high of a cost for a city. So what do we want to have then? So when investing companies want to look at communities, they're looking for several different things. And if tax breaks were the old recipe for economic development, then creating vibrant neighborhoods that can attract people from near and far is probably the new one. So in a study from the Smart Growth America's 2015 report, it showed that hundreds of companies across the U.S. are moving to and investing in walkable downtown locations. So this is happening in large part because these places help to attract and retain talented workers. So we're going to look at the quality of life. So they're looking for that great quality of life. They're looking for a walkable downtown location. They're looking for a place that they have a live, work, play neighborhood available to them. They're looking for regional centers, also that have nearby affordable housing for their employees, that also include that vibrant mix of restaurants and cafes and shops and entertainment venues and cultural attractions. And all of these are within an easy walking distance of the offices. So many of the neighborhoods these companies choose also include a wide range of home types, making them convenient places to live as well as affordable for households of all incomes. So in addition to the ones that are listed here, companies have always wanted convenient transportation, but now they place a premium on providing employees with multiple transportation options, including the ability to walk, bike, or take transit to work and meetings. So in cities that have a robust public transportation, companies consider that a crucial part of their daily operations. And then conversely, in cities with lower levels of transit service, many companies are expressing a desire to see that improve. So in a 2014 corporate leaders survey, they found that those corporate tax rates and state and local incentives ranked 7th and 8th, respectively, on a list of factors those companies considered when deciding on that new location. So what I just put up here is what the #1 factor on that list was, which is availability of skilled workers. And then also in a 2013 survey of entrepreneurs, they found that those having low taxes and a business-friendly regulations were rarely the reason for starting a business in a particular location. So rather, they looked for excellent access to customers and suppliers, also that talented pool of potential employees. And so today, many of us planners are actively working towards each and every item that I'll show on this list. And so before we may have realized it, each of the items that will be listed here equals an economic development strategy that we are integrating into the work that we do each and every day. So what is being seen is that cities across the country once relied principally on the subsidies or low tax rates in high hopes of luring big employers. So now they're doing everything they can to create great places where people and companies want to be. So it's important to provide opportunities to increase foot traffic by enhancing street improvements, make investments to transit and bike infrastructure, continue to support public parks and gathering spaces, develop policies to ensure housing for a full range of job types and income levels, and look for ways to create reuse in historic buildings. So in addition to the ones that we just saw previous, there are other items that have the potential to attract new companies. So they'll foster growth for existing local businesses, support entrepreneurs, add programs that create flexible office or co-working space. So this can make it easier for entrepreneurs to start new businesses while also filling in those commercial office spaces. So as a planner, you have the ability to make necessary changes to zoning to support businesses and provide incentives for infill development. So this approach that we see here on these past 2 slides to economic development creates lasting assets for a community that continue to pay dividends long after their initial investment. The same investment in walkable neighborhoods and regional centers can be used to help attract new businesses again and again. So today, cities that have the vibrant walkable neighborhoods are capitalizing on infrastructure and design from previous eras. But there are many communities that are intentionally building new, high-quality places to capture economic development and to grow their economy. All right, so we're going to take a look at some benefits. So of course, as #1, we know that by engaging your public and private entities, as well as strategies that are rooted in community, then you have a community outcome that can really be successful. So also in economic development, there are many other benefits, including building upon your economic competitive strengths. So this is really important, where you look at what your community has, what it's built upon, what it's known for, what the people really love about your community, and really build on that strength in order to go forward in your economic development strategies. Also, you're looking to have strategies or policies and even tools to be integrated back into your comprehensive plan, or even begin an economic development strategic plan on its own, so that you can have further integration of certain goals and visions that will be incorporated into what you want as a community. So also to have a multi-layered approach. So if you focus on having an economic development chapter within your comprehensive plan, you definitely want to make sure that it's integrated into your transportation, what you have for your vision for land use, and so forth, so that they're all layered upon one another and that they all speak to one another. And then also we know that a community that is well planned can weather those economic storms, and in turn can realize the vision of the community. They can increase the growth and prosperity, and of course ultimately thrive. So here we're going to take a look at some big questions. So these are some big overarching questions that we all think about when we think about either comprehensive planning or economic development. So how do I get more out of my plan? So as I'm doing a comprehensive plan for a community, how do we get more out of these plans so that they really can become something that will become effective within the communities that we work in? How can economic development be cross-cutting? So we just talked a little bit about how it can be interrelated into other areas into the comprehensive plan, whether that's through corridor studies or if we're doing opportunity sites or larger projects that are really across many facets of what we do for comprehensive planning. And then also what components make your city or region competitive. So we'll be looking at some competitive factors later on that you can really take away for your specific community. All right, so now we're going to take a minute here. We're actually going to do a poll. We're going to have 2 questions that we're going to pose to our listeners. And of course, your answers are anonymous. And you'll see the poll come up on your screen for you to select your choice. And so we really want to just gauge where the listeners are in either the planning process or where you're thinking about economic development. So our first question, so it's a yes, no, or not applicable answer. So have you included an economic development chapter into your comprehensive plan, or are you planning to? So yes or no or not applicable. So we'll give it about 5 or 10 seconds here for everyone to provide some answers to us. All right, a couple more seconds. Put your answer in if you haven't already. All right, we're going to close that poll. So we're going to get some answers here, and then we'll pose our second question. All right, so out of our listeners today, we have, wonderful, oh my goodness, so we almost had over 3/4 of you all voted, so thank you for your answers. So we have 65% said yes, so 65% have included an economic development chapter into the comprehensive plan, or they are planning to. So that is excellent news. That is something that is going to be very helpful to your comprehensive planning process, and so that's a great amount of folks. Okay, so we're going to have a second question here. So same thing, yes, no, or not applicable. So do you incorporate economic development into what you do every day as a planner? So I'll say that again. Do you incorporate economic development into what you do every day as a planner? Okay, so we're going to open that poll. So provide your answer. Yes, no, or not applicable. And we're going to hopefully see how many folks are really using these strategies that we're talking about in their everyday planning. As a planner, you all know that everything relates to everything else, and so most likely you're doing economic development planning even if you don't think you are specifically. So we're going to close the poll. Excellent. Thank you for your answers. We appreciate it. So we have an even higher number. So out of the respondents, thank you for responding. We have 80% of the listeners today who are doing economic development in their everyday work as a planner. So that is excellent news, and that is something that's really helpful to our communities and something that we as the Met Council can help further in terms of our resources and the help that we give through the Local Planning Assistance Division. So thank you. So as we know, so I'm talking to a very of course, I always knew educated crowd here. So we know that our comprehensive plan really is going to lead to those day-to-day operations. So most of you really know this. This is something that we look at every single day as planners, how our plan really becomes that checklist. And so to give you an overview of the comprehensive plan for those who may not know it very in depth at this point. So we're looking at a 20-year plan for your community. We're looking at the framework. The framework is going to include items like your vision, your goals, objectives, policies, strategies, which turn into your action plan. That action plan helps with your implementation. That implementation is going to have a time frame attached to it. You may list responsible parties that are responsible for the work to be done. You may attach funding sources to that economic development chapter and or your comprehensive plan as a whole. And then of course those funding sources and those budgeted items are going to tie into your CIP or your capital improvement program. your city's budget. And so that's sort of the framework that we look at in a comprehensive plan. Then we really have a comprehensive plan as a tool. So this is your ultimate tool, a way to examine and strengthen your city's ability to sustain prosperity. So your comprehensive plan really is a living, breathing, everyday guiding document. So this acts as your checklist for your community. This should be something that's always active and always being brought to the forefront in what you want to do to realize that vision. And then you want to utilize the vision of your comp plan to develop an economic development chapter that's integrated across all of the chapters in your comprehensive plan. And by our poll, it looks like most of you are already incorporating this, so that's great. So economic development. So when we think about it as an element or a chapter within the comprehensive plan, here's some overall things that we think of. So economic development as an element. So this is how you get more out of your plan. So this economic development plan or chapter provides a comprehensive overview of the economy, sets policy direction for the economic growth. It identifies strategies and programs and projects to improve the economy. So you want to ensure that the elements of economic development work together so that a community is prepared to deal with both positive and negative changes in its economic health and to initiate sustainable development and redevelopment strategies that foster the business growth and build reliance on your local assets. That's incredibly important for you to have realized the local assets of your community. So more traditional elements such as land use or infrastructure and transportation may no longer be the best place to address more complex long-range planning issues because they may require more than one solution. So in particular, planners should consider ways that economic development in the chapter can serve to tie all the other elements together in a more innovative and relevant manner. An example of this would be probably TOD planning. So when you plan for transit-oriented development, it really affects the transportation section. It's going to affect your land use section. It's going to affect your economic development section. You may have parks and other items that are along the way or open space that may tie into that. So that would be more project or corridor based. That would really be cross-cutting across many of those chapters that you see. So this is where also you're going to see those areas of economic competitiveness. So we talked about those local assets and what makes your community very different from other communities in a great way. And so you want to look at things like infrastructure, whether you have a complete sidewalk or bicycle network, if you have high capacity transit in your area or fiber optic networks, whether you're working towards increasing jobs or your workforce development, whether you have expansion of your housing choice, if you're integrating things like food systems or healthy communities, whether you're doing a BRE program, expanding your park system, and also expanding in, the expansion and retention of your local businesses. So all of these things, your economic competitiveness is really going to solidify whether you have a sense of place in your own community. So we're going to look at some of those common components. So when we look at having an economic development chapter within your comprehensive plan, here are some things that typically go into those chapters. So first we're going to have a land use connection. So the economic development chapter generally ties land use decisions made during the comprehensive planning process to economic development goals and objectives. And the goals and objectives also help tie other elements together, such as utilities or infrastructure or transportation. So just as I mentioned before, that TOD example, that's something that's going to integrate land use into the chapter. So another one is data. So data is used as a means to justify or consider key economic development indicators in the context of the community's long-range economic outlook. So it's important to find locally relevant and quality data. And some sources for this are the Esri Business Analyst, CoStar, Salesforce, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and of course the U.S. Census Bureau. So next we talk about those goals, policies, and strategies. So a general set of policies that helps guide decision-making bodies, so especially your elected or appointed officials in the future implementation phase. So the intent is that these goals, policies, and strategies will help build consensus. So a typical policy incorporated into the economic element is one that emphasizes diversification of the local tax base. So that usually means that something that's manifested in the future land use plan and has a mix of land uses and character types that support that type of economy. So then, of course, after those strategies, you roll into having your action items, and then those in turn become programs that can be enacted in your city. So the purpose of developing that list of programs is to facilitate your plan implementation. So programs typically range from those that promote travel or tourism to those that focus on infill development or redevelopment. Infrastructure projects are critical to economic development, and they're typically laid out in a context of a CIP, so your capital improvement program. Then you have tools. We have a whole slide dedicated to tools, so we'll go into that a little bit further in a minute here. But you need a well-equipped toolbox with all of the things that you would like to have to achieve the planning for economic development success. So typically, you want to incorporate economic elements such as financial tools or a list of grant opportunities, as well as programs and indicators in which the city can measure the success. That's also very important for any appointed officials, or if you have a city council or a planning commission or any of your other commissions or stakeholder groups. You really want to have some sort of measure of success so that you know that you're going on the right track within your comprehensive plan. And then, of course, if you'd like to focus on opportunity sites, development, redevelopment, that can be incorporated into this chapter within the comp plan. You may want to consider having a market analysis within your comprehensive plan. So not only does a market analysis provide a defensible baseline for all comprehensive plan recommendations, it can also help focus planners and their consultant teams, if you should have one, on strategies and recommendations that yield that faster return. So you're going to know what your community is based on for a good foundation in order to make those recommendations for that part of the chapter. And then, of course, there's placemaking and public art. And so this can really be a strategic way to improve the quality of life through economic development. You could be focusing this on a small area plan after the comp plan is completed, or you may want to focus on different programs that enhance public art within your community or within your downtown. And then, of course, the last area within the chapter that could be included is your implementation or indicators of success. So you do want to ensure that the plan includes creative and innovative strategies and recommendations that coordinate internally with each other. And so also within all of this, I'd like to mention the importance also of your community engagement. And so from beginning to end and beyond, you want to make sure that your community is engaged, your stakeholders are engaged, as well as your public officials, and making sure that everyone is included and has a voice in the process. So here we're going to just take a look at the framework. So here's one of the ways that we can really visually see how those long-term plans, which start with your vision, they turn into goals, which then have strategies attached to them, and of course all of those action plans that turn into your day-to-day operations. And so you want to make sure that your comprehensive plan is that active checklist that can realize this type of a visual for your framework. Then, of course, that graphic is turned into something that really has some content related to it. So you go from your vision up top into your multiple goals, which turn into strategies, and then your action items. And so after this would, of course, be your implementation schedule. That would tell you when all of these things need to be completed in the short term, near term, and long term. So here's an example from the city of Shakopee. So the city of Shakopee has in its County Road 101 marketing plan, they have an implementation chapter. And within that, they have these list of questions. So they have an overview and decision principles checklist. So every time a development comes to Shakopee, or every time they make a decision, they ask where they are within these questions of how it will relate to the city, how it will benefit the city, and how it can create something that they would like to see in their vision. And so this is a great way to really have that checks and balance of whether it fits into what they would like to see in the future, in their long-term vision. So then in the next area within the implementation section, they have, of course, the long table. So they have the spreadsheet where they talk about their action items. So these are all those action items, all the checklist items. And they do a great job of relating them to who's responsible for enacting those actions. And then attached to that is the cost. So they have a $1 sign equaling kind of a lower amount, and then $3 signs is a greater amount of money for each of those items. And then they establish timing. So each of those letters represents a short-term and long-term, midterm type of timing on those items. Then they go into funding options. So they've already ahead of time identified ways that these action items could be funded within their community. And then lastly, they have vision principles. So the entire chapter is based on these vision principles that they then tie back to the action items. This really helps with your community, with your elected officials, even maybe with folks that are just moving into Shakopee. They can understand that these action items are related back to a larger vision. And so the two are always tied together, which is very important for your community. So we're going to be taking a look now at some tools. So I told you that we were going to have a whole page of tools that you'll be able to take a look at. And if at the end of the webinar you want to ask more detailed questions about these tools, feel free. So first we have zoning codes and design standards. So what is really important to know is when you are developing your comprehensive plan or your economic development chapter within your comp plan, that you are then making sure that you have your regulatory tools in place, such as zoning code or design standards. So it would really be a shame for you to maybe recommend form-based zoning or maybe something different within your downtown, and then your zoning code may not allow it because it has a variety of different setbacks that may not coordinate with that vision. Also, you may want to allow different types of businesses within a certain zoning district, but then those uses were not expanded within your zoning code. And so this is a great way to formulate the code to really be what do I call it, a high performance zoning code. So it's something that really is going to help you. It's going to be a tool of all the things you can do when you open it up. How can we get this development into our city that fits our vision? Our zoning code is going to be our tool in order to do that. So you're also going to probably have some small area plans. So based on your comprehensive plan, you may have identified areas that you would like for an opportunity site or redevelopment. You may want to have a downtown revitalization or master plan. And so this is going to be a tool that's going to help realize that and really hone in on those areas that need that extra attention or extra policy. So this is going to be an area where that tool is going to make a difference. And then, of course, your land use map. So based on your land use chapter within your comprehensive plan and what you'd like to see in your economic development chapter, your land use map should reflect that. So if there's an area that you would like to incorporate, maybe a creative economy district, or you have a manufacturing district along a specific corridor to enhance and retain your industrial businesses, you want to make sure that your land use map also has communication with that vision, because your land use map is also just as important as the zoning code. So then you may want to incorporate a business retention or expansion program, so a BRE. So this can be done through your local chamber of commerce. This can be something that the city does within its own staff. It can also be something that maybe you train for. The University of Minnesota has a great program through its extension program that has a BRE. So it's kind of like a small area plan. It's something that you do to retain and expand your own local businesses within your city. So this is really something that will help you have that further community engagement with your business community and be a great tool for economic development. So here's where we talk about economic market analysis again. So this is something that's also really helpful for cities to study the demographics, the market demands, the trends, to help determine what kind of businesses and housing would be successful in your community. Also to analyze or understand or anticipate changes that may affect your community. So you also will see financial tools, funding sources, and grant funding. So these are some things that we had talked about before. This shouldn't be the only tool in your toolbox. You should have multiple tools that can support multiple visions within your economic development chapter. And then we talked a little bit about those regulatory tools, the development review process. So this is something that's really important for your community to have in place that's business friendly, that also aligns with those visions that you have for your comprehensive plan and the economic development chapter. You want to make sure that when a business or when a developer comes and takes a look at the comp plan for the areas of opportunity or the corridor study, and they want to fit in with that vision, that the development process really mirrors the whether it's an expedited process or whether it's a process that's already in place in order to support that vision. And then, of course, your best practices, you want to make sure that those are in line with your economic development policies that you have. Land assembly. So if there's areas within your land use map or within development that want to assemble land, or if there's a tax forfeited property, you want to make sure that those processes are in place within your city. And then, of course, we have our placemaking and urban design. So this could be, urban design really could be its own chapter as well within the comprehensive plan, or it can be something that's incorporated in different ways in your zoning ordinance. And then also placemaking, that could be something that is wrapped into a small area plan as well. And then, of course, historic preservation. So whether you're part of a Main Street program or focusing on adaptive reuse of your historic downtown or historic properties, it's very important to place that also at the forefront of what you can use as a tool. All right, so we're going to take a look at economic competitiveness as a whole. So within the Met Council's Thrive MSP 2040 plan, economic competitiveness is a core element for the region's sustained prosperity. So this element is designed to foster connected land use options, to provide businesses and industries with access to materials, markets, and talents. And as we know, prosperity is fostered by investments in infrastructure and amenities that create regional economic competitiveness. So here's a fun way for us to take a look at how planners, so what do planners say about economic development? So I surveyed planners from various local and state levels of government, from public and private sectors, city planners, and economic development planners, and asked them how they are integrating economic development into the work that they do every day, and then also what they thought other planners should consider focusing on for economic development. So some of the common themes that came out of the survey include the following. So we have involve your economic development staff. So involve them in the development review process so that they're able to make potential applicants aware of incentives that may be out there as they formulate those projects. Then they want to be aware of what incentives the city, the county, or the state have to offer, as projects have several components to them. And so they all need to come together. So it takes time, but companies want to know that they're getting all that is offered, and the more you know about those offerings, the more you can have an attractive community to those developers. So you also want to adopt a customer service orientation to development review so that potential applicants or new businesses know the process of obtaining development approvals, so that they'll be straightforward and fair. They say that you could utilize a mapping system of available sites that you as a planner can refer to. Also, you can refer the developers to it. So you want to provide the developers with tools and data and zoning information that will help them with their decision making. You also want to ensure that the planning and economic development departments are always working together to ensure communication happens on a regular basis. So I don't know, some folks may not have both departments. They may just have a planning department or economic development, but you want to make sure that both of those parties are on the same page, or whether that may be your EDA, so maybe your Economic Development Authority as a commission, or they are an authority, but make sure that they are also in the loop with the developments that are coming in. So you also want to make sure to include those economic development professionals early on in the process, and from the beginning, have those built relationships accordingly. So that ties back into our community engagement also. So you want to make sure that the community is on board, as well as all of your developers that come in and your economic development professionals. Then you want to know what industries your community is trying to attract and what incentives you offer. So if a developer is still looking for tenants, you could share with them the industries that your community is trying most to attract. And that makes it easier for them to pitch their development to companies if they share that incentives will be offered to them. And then lastly, you want to create policies, plans, and codes that are supportive of economic development. So for instance, if you're working on finalizing a form-based code for the future industrial area, you would hopefully have a streamlined development review process that supports that vision for projects. And then you also want to make sure that it's the idea is to create an environment where the businesses want to be, and you want to create employment. Okay, so now we're going to take a look on the flip side. So what economic development professionals, what they say about planning. So here's a few things. So they are encouraging planners to promote and emphasize infrastructure improvements. They're looking for planners to work with the local chambers on that BRE effort that we talked about, that business retention and expansion effort, to help improve the mix of jobs and industries. They ask for planners to focus on running a good city. They're also asking for a strategic use of a variety of programs to enhance the sustainable economic development capacity of cities and regions. They're also asking planners to follow trends of changing technology, also to increase the productivity and competitiveness of existing establishments, and lastly, to increase entrepreneurial activity and co-working spaces, and to better match employee skill needs with the supply of skills of the resident workforce. And then we take a look at business perspective. So as a business, and when they come into your community, similar to the smart growth research, we see that businesses want to locate where they're wanted. They want to have a government to, or the government, local government, to appreciate their contribution to the economy and to value local ownership. They also want to work with officials that are focused on growing the economy, who value their business activity, and to be in a city where government is strategically focused on providing a business-friendly place. So here is an area that is also a great research. So this is a book that was done out of the University of Southern Mississippi. And so it takes a look at how planners create employment, grow businesses, and build a greater economic resilience for lower income communities. So it's called the Economic Development for Everyone. It's focused on 5 dimensions of empowerment. So over the course of their studies, they had a look at all of these communities within Mississippi, and they really boiled it down to 5 dimensions that can really help planners. So it's not just for rural towns or inner cities or aging suburbs or those other communities. It's really for everyone, not just the elite communities. And so we're having a look at these 5 dynamic dimensions. So first is empowering your residents. So in the book that talks about just beginning with basic education for enhancing your community to build on those existing assets, something that we talked about earlier. For diversifying your economy. So this is really talking about adding a variety of businesses. To encourage your entrepreneurs. So this is about cultivating incubators for your entrepreneurs. And then the last one, for sustaining your development, this is really about investing in infrastructure. And so we have this resource as a part of our resource page that you could take a deeper look at, but this is something that's really important so that we incorporate these elements into all of our communities and what we can do to help it enhance the vision that we have. So now we're going to take a look at those community examples. So we're going to have 6 examples that we're going to have a look at where they are incorporating economic development into their comprehensive plan or as a strategic plan, and see if they're experiencing any of those successful outcomes. So first we have the city of Raleigh, North Carolina. So the city of Raleigh is the capital of North Carolina, with a city of nearly 440,000 in population and a land area of about 142 square miles. And so economic development is one of 13 elements within the 2030 comprehensive plan for the city. And the plan contains 6 strategic vision themes, which are referenced in every element or chapter of the document. So they highlight components such as commercial corridor and neighborhood reinvestment, entrepreneurs and business development, workforce training and access to employment, land use, hospitality, tourism, creative industries, and organizing, structure, and functions. And so under each of these components are policies and action items, such as partnership with workforce development. And the action item tied to that is work with Wake County to provide job training and education for those who need to retrain for new industry jobs. So they also include this map. So they also include priority areas for economic development, which is extremely helpful to know where the key areas for economic development should be happening within the city. And so here's where they've seen some success. So since 2009, the city has accomplished 5 corridor studies, 7 area plans, 2 transportation initiatives, 1 open space plan, and one of their goals for updating the new comprehensive plan is to revise the implementation element to maintain a relevant process for tracking progress as the actions of the plan are realized. So they're really understanding how those indicators of success really measure into what they're doing for implementation. So here's our next example. So this one is Sussex County in Delaware. And so this county is just over 200,000 people within 936 square miles. So the Sussex County Comp Plan focuses on strengthening agriculture, protecting open space, fostering more affordable housing, and encouraging greener construction. So this chapter has been incorporated into the comprehensive plan, and it focuses on strategies such as maintaining land use, zoning, conservation policies, and regulations that keep agriculture economically viable in the county, intensifying efforts to diversify the local economy by recruiting employers with year-round higher-paying jobs, and funding a professional target market analysis to study business match, labor force, educational resources, and how the county can better partner with others in a coordinated recruitment strategy. So in 2016, just last year, the Comp Plan Update Report, which you see here, economic development was highlighted as one of the elements that has seen positive implementation. So agriculture and tourism continue to be some of the county's main economic drivers, while the influx in those well-paying jobs, increase in technology businesses, and the construction of a fiber network have all improved the county tremendously. Okay, so now we're going to go to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So in 2015, the city of Lancaster developed an economic development strategic plan called Building on Strength, the community-owned economic development strategic plan for the city of Lancaster, which is the world's longest title, but that's okay. So Lancaster is a city of about 60,000 people, and it just covers 7.5 square miles, so not very much area that they have for their city. So the strategic plan was developed from a series of recommendations in the city's community plan. So this came out of their community plan, which is like a comp plan, in order to do this strategic plan. And it reacted to the needs to stimulate economic development and has been responsible for shaping much of what has been accomplished in Lancaster over the past several years. So these milestones have included the addition of major developments, a vibrant and growing arts community, and the development of major educational and entertainment venues. So I'll show you here. So this plan focuses on 8 specific areas throughout the city, as well as plan outcomes that represent indicators by 2030. And one of them, as you can see here, I think it's was it the first one? No. Second from the last one, they want to realize $1 billion in private capital investment. And so they have these really great plan outcomes that they would like to see by 2030 that really help emphasize that implementation strategy that they have, which rolls into that strategic plan. So these are really great emphasis that they have for their plans. So our next one is from Sterling, Illinois. So Sterling, Illinois is about a population of about 15,000 people with an area of 6 square miles. The city's been long associated with manufacturing and with the steel industry. And so within the city's comprehensive plan, it's roughly about 100 pages. Economic development is a chapter that focuses on the area that will help the community transition into future prosperity. So they are using what they call cultivating the new uses of economy. So they recognize that traditional manufacturing in the U.S. is on the decline and that new production-oriented process is showing much more promise. And so they also want to be included with emphasizing fiber and energy infrastructure. And so the chapter also includes and identifies the community's asset base, major opportunity sectors, and a robust action plan, which I just highlighted here, called Making It Happen, which I think is great. I say, why not call it Making It Happen? I think that's a great way to have your implementation plan be focused on. And so it includes an area focused on special stimulus projects, and one of which is to establish a skilled crafts incubator. So they understand the local assets of their community, and they're really trying to capitalize on that, as well as change. So change is not always easy for everyone, but they understand that in the market that they're in for their city, they have to realize that and plan for that in the future in order to stay relevant in what they're good at in this day and age. So now we're going to take a look at Wisconsin. So our neighbor to the east currently has state enabling legislation in the form of a smart growth law. So as a result of the law, there's a very specific guidance in the state of Wisconsin on how to prepare the economic development element of a comprehensive plan. So throughout the U.S., this is really the exception rather than the norm. So the guidance document is very valuable because other municipalities can follow closely in order to create a meaningful economic development element. And so more importantly, the guiding document stresses the purpose of an economic development element as being about working together to maintain a strong economy by creating and retaining desirable jobs which provide a good standard of living for individuals. So this recognition is important because it emphasizes the increasingly important role of economic development in public policy decision making. And then lastly, the guiding document sets the tone for arguments in support of a market assessment, so sort of like a market analysis, by suggesting that the element reflect current market conditions. All right, and our last community is Stillwater, Minnesota, of course. So this city is nearly 19,000 people over 8 square miles. So the city of Stillwater has included an economic development chapter within its comprehensive plan. The city has made a conscious decision to build its economy by capitalizing on the historical aspect of the city and maintaining that high quality of life. So the chapter provides an overview of the employment and economic conditions in Stillwater and describes the districts where economic activity is concentrated. The chapter then discusses the variety of economic development tools and techniques available to the city and provides a list of implementation programs to meet the goals and policies. So the framework of this chapter is really well done. So I'll show you an example here. So the framework poses all of the areas that you want to see in your economic development chapter. So it has your goals and objectives and policies and programs that the city plans on realizing. So it also takes a look at how they can do that financially. So they have a really robust financial section which talks about tools such as tax increment financing and where those districts are going to occur within the city, which is extremely helpful. So they feature a market analysis, an economic overview of the city, as well as those financial tools. So also, I will mention Burnsville is working currently on their comprehensive plan, and they're also incorporating a market analysis into their comprehensive plan update. So if you go to the City of Burnsville website, they have their information on their proposed market analysis at the moment, so you can check that out too. So that wraps up our 6 examples, as well as what we have to offer today. And so really what we would like to do is to offer you additional resources, which we'll talk about. If you have areas that you would like us to help you with within your comprehensive plan in terms of economic development, how it can relate to other chapters, please feel free to contact me or your sector representative, and we can get you even more information than what we provided today. So I'm going to hand it back over to Raya, and she's going to close it out for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. So as promised, now we have time to answer a few questions. Let me go to the questions. Okay, you talked about an economic development chapter and economic development element and integrating economic development across chapters. Do you have suggestions for best practices in how to include this element without having a separate non-required chapter, or how to call out those items so they are evident within each chapter?
That's a great question. Thank you. So there are many ways that you can incorporate economic development strategies, tools, policies across the entire comprehensive plan. So that's something that you're going to want to look at when you're developing your land use, your transportation, even when you're doing your parks and open space. If you have various chapters, you want to make sure that they're all tied together, and that maybe you have, you call it out in a certain way where you highlight economic development, maybe you call it something else, but as long as you can see it across all of those chapters, you can see that they're all tied together. So like we talked about, just normal everyday planning items are really integrated into what we do as planners each and every day. So you can also do that within your comprehensive plan. So there's a way to link all of those together so that it becomes evident that you are incorporating economic development strategies.
Okay. Next question. Any recommendations on how cities can plan for the impact of demographic changes on economic development and still be resilient, such as shrinking workforce, technology, and aging population?
Sure. So when you are in the midst of your comprehensive plan update, it's really important to have that initial framework and foundation set. So whether that's through the update of your demographics, so we have great forecasters here at Met Council who provide that information for you to set the tone for your comprehensive plan. You can then look at how that strategically rolls into what you want to do for land use in terms of what you want to do for your future planning for, let's say, your downtown or your business districts. And so you want to make sure that all of those elements tie back to that foundation. You may want to consider a market analysis that may also fill in some of those gaps that you don't necessarily see that are obvious. And so I always believe the more information you have, the better. That can really boil down into those policies and strategies into your comprehensive plan. That's always helpful to get that full picture.
Thank you. I think we have time for at least one more. How does a market analysis inform a comprehensive plan or zoning ordinance?
So what we have for a market analysis, we talked about that a few times, and it really is looking like a really great way to support either your economic development chapter or your comprehensive plan as a whole. So you want to understand the market opportunities by conducting that analysis, and is another tool that municipalities can have in their toolbox when it comes to planning and zoning. So you want to really encourage whether it's your own community or others to incorporate that market analysis so that you can make decisions from the comprehensive plan that then go into your zoning ordinance. So you want to have that informed analysis when you're formulating your market analysis. But we do have more information on our resource pages. We actually have two different, we have an expert article from Met Council that you can look into, and then there's also another, it actually came out in January of this year. So it's a kind of a news blast from another city that talks about market analysis and how they incorporated it into their comprehensive plan. So definitely look to those for even more in-depth information.
Okay. Thank you, Corinne. I apologize if there are questions that we didn't get to. We will post them as part of the Q&A that we will post later on the website. But if you do have any questions, feel free to contact Corinne. Her contact information is also on the handout that's attached to the webinar. So before we leave, I just have a couple of things to add. This webinar does provide 1 CM credit. So if you want to record this credit for your certification, you can search it under PlanIt on the APA website, or you can use the code 9119515. Our next PlanIt event is actually an in-person workshop on using racial equity tools to prepare and respond to climate impacts and growing community health. The workshop on August 2nd is designed for the communities within the Mississippi River Corridor critical area only, and it will be covering requirements of a, for short, MERCA plan. Please check the details of all these workshops and more on the PlanIt website. and you can sign up for it. Most of them, the sign up is available already. As you are exiting this webinar, you'll be prompted to answer a very short 5-question survey that we would really appreciate if you take a moment and respond to them. It will help us in planning our future events. And finally, we will be posting this webinar's video and the PowerPoint as a PDF format, as well as the Q&A as well as the Q&A document, as I mentioned, including all the questions that we did answer and the ones that we didn't get to. So we will be posting that online within the next week. So feel free to contact us at any point with any questions or comments, and we thank you for joining us today.